The day has come to finally ride BMW 310s in India, and we're starting out with the motorcycle everyone's been waiting for, the 310 GS. And this is the motorcycle that kickstarts it at this level. What is this level? It's 3.49 lakh rupees ex-showroom, so that makes it an expensive motorcycle. But does it have everything it needs to justify that price? Well, let's find out. You do know that the 310R and the 310 GS are virtually the same motorcycle. But obviously the first difference that you notice is this design. This is inspired by the R1200 GS, BMW's iconic on-off-roader. And you can already see the elements. For example, the beak obviously is the obvious one. This grey bit is interesting because on the GS, on the big GS, this is a structural element and it's finished in this grey color. On this one, it's a plastic element, but it does remind you strongly of that motorcycle, and I really do like it for that. Behind this also is the seat, which is a 835 mm tall seat. So it's a little bit taller than the R for sure, but it's also a narrow motorcycle. So I would suspect that getting your feet down would not be such a problem. And the other reason why a big seat, a tall seat is important is because when you're in traffic and you're able to look over traffic, you find gaps easier and makes your commute a little bit simpler. Those of us who like to go a little bit fast, it's also a way to make better decisions and get through traffic faster. How does the engine support this? The 310cc liquid-cooled fuel-injected engine makes 34 PS and 28 Nm of torque. It's tilted a little bit backwards for center of gravity, but it's mounted in reverse, so the exhaust leaves the back of the engine and goes straight out. The fuel injection equipment is in the front. But together, the bike comes together very, very nicely because it's a sweet motorcycle. Like all BMWs, it goes easily and smoothly. There's hardly any sense of stress from the engine. There is some vibration at about 8000 RPM, but 110 kmph cruise is easy, 145 kmph is your top speed. So in that sense, the package really works and I'm really impressed. But the question I know you want answered is, how does it do off-road? Well, look at the frame. The frame, this part of it, the swing arm is virtually identical to the 310R again, but this thing has bigger suspension. So the rear unit is a longer unit, the front forks have 40 mm more travel and they are slightly longer. That reduces the rake effectively a little bit. The axle is forward offset, that increases the trail a little bit. So this is a more stable motorcycle. More importantly, while it does have alloy wheels, it does have a 19-inch front with Metzeler Torrance tires and a 17-inch rear. That's a light off-road configuration that is quite popular for a dual sport where you know that primarily it's going to go down the road, but if there was a bad road or a situation where you had to go through an off-road patch, the motorcycle will not notice it at all. The bumps and stones that you hit don't seem to deflect it off its path at all, and in that sense, with a little bit of skill and a little bit of confidence, this is an off-roader that would do really well. But what is even more impressive is the quality of the motorcycle, and that adds on because BMW tells us they make essentially two specifications for this motorcycle, the European spec and the American spec. The European spec divides into 45 total motorcycles. That's regulatory requirements. So for example, the India spec has a front number plate and a sari guard, that kind of thing. And in that sense, a European customer and us, we're getting to buy the exact same motorcycle in terms of quality. There isn't a second spec. What that means is each of these panels is finished extraordinarily well. There's been a lot of attention paid to the finish of these materials, how they fit together. So the sense of quality that you get from this motorcycle honestly is unprecedented. I would say of all the motorcycles built in India, and for example TVS makes some absolutely gorgeous ones, this motorcycle is another level up in terms of quality, and more importantly, the quality shines because when you go off-road, it doesn't seem to feel like the bike is suffering or the bike is going to break. So if you were to make 10 trips to Ladakh, I would suspect that the bike would feel just the same after the 10th trip, with very, very little having rattled or shaken loose from the punishment that Ladakh meets out. In that sense, how does this bike perform in the real world? Well, I think it will be a nice highway bike, but the highway cruise is going to be about 110. When you get to about 120, the right foot peg vibrates a little bit. When you cross 8000, there's a little bit of vibration everywhere. Not a deal breaker, but it's there. But again, if you compare it to the Apache 310, TVS used their own electronics for the fuel injection, for the spark plug. This has a completely different electronic system, and I think this makes this bike a little bit smoother. Also remember, BMW tends not to make urgent, frantic engines. They like to make their engines stress-free and confident, and that's exactly what they're doing. As a city bike, I think it's going to be really good, but what does it do out on the highway? Well, I think it's going to be pretty good there too. First of all, that luggage rack is quite large and I think it'll take a lot of luggage without interfering with your space. But more importantly, your highway cruise is about 110, top speed is 145, and there's a lot of performance between those two speed ranges. If you're overtaking something, you will not be shortchanged. So overall, BMW has got a very interesting package here, because this is a good city bike. It's really well made, it is expensive, it's a nice highway bike, it does off-roading quite well, and these are the basic 3 requirements that we had from India's first ADV kind of motorcycle. That they've got going for them. The price is high, but BMW also has extremely good packages for EMIs and stuff. And my first impression today, I think we've ridden this bike about 20 to 25 kilometers, so that's not a whole hell of a lot. But in these 20-25 kilometers, my impression, extremely well made, knows what it's doing, very calm in demeanor, very confident, and it feels like a motorcycle that you'd invest in and keep for a while because it will simply last. Is that a good start for the BMW 310 GS? I think it is.